Salisbury Plain, England. Approximately 2480 BCE, the last stone goes up. 25 tons of sarsen, hauled from a quarry 25 miles away, lowered into a socket that has been prepared for it, precisely, carefully, by people who have been building this thing for 500 years. Not them personally, their ancestors, and their ancestors before them. This monument has been under construction for longer than the entire span of recorded Roman history. And on the day the final stone is placed, the people who place it have no idea they are finishing something. They think they are continuing it. Within 100 years, roughly 3 human generations, 90% of them are gone. Not gone as in moved away. Not gone as in culturally absorbed. Gone as in their DNA disappears from the British archaeological record with a completeness that, when scientists first saw the data, they thought they must have made an error. They checked it again. Then again, the number held. Dr. Inigo Olalde and his team, working between Harvard Medical School and the Institute of Evolutionary Biology in Barcelona, published those numbers in Nature in 2018. They had sequenced ancient DNA from over 400 individuals across prehistoric Britain. What they found was not a migration. It was not a cultural exchange. It was a near-total biological replacement of one population by another, compressed into a time frame so short it barely registers on a geological scale. 90% gone. Within a century of the last stone. Here's what that number means in human terms. If you lined up 10 people descended from the Stonehenge builders in 2480 BCE and then went back 100 years later, only one of those bloodlines would still be there. Maybe one. The other 9 had vanished. Everything you think you know about who built Stonehenge and why it matters to you is built on a story that ends here. If you've ever actually wondered where you come from, not the family story people tell at Christmas, but the real biological answer written in your genome, subscribe, because what this video is about to show you goes deeper than most people are willing to go. The people who replaced the Stonehenge builders came from somewhere specific. And that place, the actual origin point of the people who became most modern Northwestern Europeans, is the last place anyone expected. Engagement question A. Actually, before we go any further, I genuinely want to know something. If you've had a DNA ancestry test, drop your results in the comments. Where did it say you were from? Because by the end of this video, I want to show you something that will completely change how you read that number. Your answer matters here more than you might think. The Rijnsmoes Delta, the present-day Netherlands, 6,500 years before the birth of Christ. The land here is waterlogged. Reed beds, peat bogs, seasonal flooding. This is not prime real estate. While Neolithic farmers are systematically moving across Central and Southern Europe, reshaping the genetics of every population they encounter, this narrow strip of coastland stays different. The people here are hunter-gatherers, and they are not being replaced. Not because the farmers couldn't find them, because the land itself resisted agriculture, and the people on it resisted with it. For 3,000 years, 3,000, while the genetic map of the entire surrounding continent is being redrawn, this small population in the Dutch wetlands maintains its ancestral DNA. Completely. A Western hunter-gatherer holdout, surviving in one of the least glamorous stretches of land in prehistoric Europe. Archaeologists, until very recently, barely gave this region a second glance. David Reich, possibly the most important ancient DNA scientist working today, based at Harvard Medical School, described the Netherlands during this period as, and I'm quoting him directly, the most boring place in the world. He was wrong, in the most consequential way imaginable. In 2026, Reich's team published the results of sequencing 112 ancient individuals from this region. What they found was that this overlooked wetland population, these stubborn holdouts in the Dutch peat bogs, had quietly become something extraordinary. Through gradual admixture with incoming steppe migrants, they formed the Bell Beaker culture. And the Bell Beaker culture crossed the North Sea into Britain around 2400 BCE and replaced 90% of the people who built Stonehenge. The most boring place in the prehistoric world produced the most dramatic population replacement in British history. The people who became British, Irish, and Northwestern Europeans did not come from the great farming civilizations of the South. They came from a swamp, and here's where it becomes genuinely strange. This population had resisted replacement for 3 millennia. They had outlasted every adjacent population. They were the last survivors of a genetic world that was disappearing all around them. And then, in a historical blink, they became the mechanism of someone else's erasure. The last Western hunter-gatherers of Northwestern Europe did not fade out. They crossed the channel and took over a continent, Leon, Spain, 2006. An archaeologist working in the Labranja cave complex reaches into the floor sediment and pulls out a human wisdom tooth. It is 7,000 years old. In 2014, the team led by Dr. Carles Laluiza Fox at the Institute of Evolutionary Biology in Barcelona sequences the full genome. The result stops the lab cold. This man, a Mesolithic European, a member of the population who predated all farming in Western Europe, had dark skin. Not slightly darker, dark. The pigmentation genes in his DNA are the same African frequency variants found across sub-Saharan populations today. And alongside those genes, something else entirely. The alleles for blue eyes, dark skin, blue eyes. 7,000 years ago, in Spain. A combination no living European carries, a face no museum has ever shown you. A person who does not match any popular image of ancient Europeans, because the popular image is wrong. Everything I just told you. Hold on to it. Because it's about to mean something completely different when you see how light skin actually arrived in Europe. A 2025 study published in PNAS using a new genotype likelihood method developed specifically for ancient fragmented DNA confirmed what the Labranja result suggested. Dark skin was not an exception in Mesolithic Europe, it was the rule. The study found that statistically dark skin pigmentation remained common across European populations until approximately 3,000 years ago. Not 10,000, not 6,000, 3,000, within the span of recorded history. Light skin did not evolve in Europe, it arrived. It came first with Neolithic farmers pushing in from Anatolia around 9,000 years ago. People who carried lighter pigmentation genes suited for low UV northern climates and a grain-based diet that was low in vitamin D. Their genetics spread. But the process was slow, uneven, and never fully replaced what was there. And then there is Otzi, the 5,300-year-old mummy discovered in the Italian Alps in 1991, studied for decades, reconstructed in museums across the world, given pale skin in every single one of those reconstructions. When a high-coverage genome study in 2023 confirmed his actual pigmentation genes, he had dark skin. Every museum display of him was genomically incorrect. Decades of visitors looking at a face that the DNA says never existed. The face you associate with ancient Europe is not indigenous, it is post-migration. It arrived in waves from the east, and it was not dominant until the Iron Age. What came before it looked nothing like what we have been shown. And if the face changed this completely, the question is what else changed, and how? Let me give the opposing argument its full credit, because it deserves it. For decades, serious archaeologists argued that the Bell Beaker phenomenon, the spread of that distinctive pottery style, those burial practices, that metalwork, was not primarily about people moving. It was about ideas moving. Mark van der Linden at University College London put it precisely. In Europe, it was the pots that moved, not the people. And he had rigorous archaeological reasons to say so. In Central Europe, Bell Beaker cultural markers spread into regions where the underlying genetics barely changed. The artifacts traveled, the bodies in many cases stayed. This was not an unreasonable position. It fit a lot of the evidence. And yet, the data said the exact opposite in Britain. Not just the autosomal data showing 90% replacement, something more specific, more damaging to the peaceful diffusion theory. Dr. Ian Mathieson at the University of Pennsylvania, working with colleagues at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, published something in Nature in 2015 that the cultural diffusion model cannot explain away. He looked at the X chromosome. Here is why that matters. Every male inherits exactly one X chromosome, and it comes from his mother. If you compare the ancestry on the X chromosome versus the ancestry on the other chromosomes in Bronze Age European males, you can measure directly whether the replacement was sex-balanced or not. A balanced migration would show similar ancestry patterns on both. An unequal replacement would show a gap. There was a gap. The X chromosome in Bronze Age European males carried significantly more indigenous European ancestry than the autosomes. More of the original population in the maternal line, far less in the paternal line. The only coherent explanation, Neolithic European women were incorporated into the incoming population. Neolithic European men were not. At the LBK massacre site of Schletz, Austria, dated approximately 5000 BCE, examined in ancient DNA studies, 67 individuals show evidence of systematic killing. Nearly all of them are young men. The women are largely absent from the burial assemblage. The process that produced modern European ancestry was not a migration. At a genomic level, it was structured around the removal of men. Stay with me, because this next part is the reason this video exists. 2/3 of all European men alive today trace their Y chromosome, the direct patrilineal line, to just 3 male ancestors. 3 men who lived somewhere between 3,500 and 7,300 years ago. Their lineages exploded across the continent. The same pattern does not appear in the maternal line. Whatever happened in the Bronze Age happened specifically to men. 3 men, 2/3 of Europe. That number stopped me cold the first time I read it. Engagement question B. In our last video, we traced where the Yamnaya came from, and a lot of you told me you were genuinely shaken by how recently and how completely that expansion reshaped the world. I want to ask you something now, at this exact moment in the story. The men who carried out this replacement, their Y chromosome is in your body right now if you have European ancestry. Does that feel like inheritance to you? Or does it feel like something else? Put it in the comments. Because the next 20 minutes are going to make that question a lot harder to answer. Approximately 400 BCE, the flatlands between the northern face of the Caucasus Mountains and the lower Volga River. A group of people, probably no more than several thousand of them, spread across a handful of neighboring communities, fishes, hunts, and begins, tentatively, to herd. They speak a language. We have no record of it. No writing, no inscription, no artifact with words on it. But we know it existed. Because the 430-plus languages descended from it are spoken today by approximately 3.5 billion people. English, Spanish, French, German, Persian, Hindi, Urdu, Russian, Bengali, Greek. Every one of them is a direct genetic descendant of whatever those few thousand people were saying to each other on that steppe 6,500 years ago. This discovery was effectively made public in February 2025. Almost nobody talked about it at the volume it deserved. Until now, Dr. Usuf Zaritis, Dr. David Reich at Harvard Medical School and Professor Ron Pinhasi at the University of Vienna published 2 connected studies in Nature identifying a population they designated the Caucasus Lower Volga group, the CLV people. Analysis of DNA from 435 individuals from archaeological sites across Eurasia confirmed something that had eluded researchers for 3 decades. The CLV people provided approximately 80% of the ancestry of the Yamnaya, and CLV ancestry appears in Anatolia in individuals dated before the Hittite era, finally resolving a 30-year puzzle about why the ancient Hittite language, one of the oldest Indo-European languages we have written records for, showed no Yamnaya genetic signal in earlier studies. The CLV people entered Anatolia separately, earlier through the east. The Yamnaya expanded westward into Europe. Same language family, different routes, same source. The CLV people lived mostly off fishing and hunting. They probably never exceeded a few tens of thousands of individuals in total. Their combined descendants now constitute roughly half the world's population. This discovery was made from a 6,500-year-old community of fishermen in a steppe region that most people have never heard of. And it contains an implication that the 2025 study makes explicit. One that is, frankly, the most counterintuitive thing I have encountered in years of reading this research. The language came from the women. Among the CLV people, the Proto-Indo-European language structure, the core grammar, the root vocabulary, was already in place before the Y chromosome haplogroup that dominates modern European men's paternal lines was even associated with it. R1b, the haplogroup carried by the majority of Western European men today, the signature of the Bronze Age expansion, was not present in the original CLV population. It arrived later through men. The language was already there, carried through generations by women. Somewhere on the Pontic-Caspian steppe, there is a burial site at a place called Remontnoy, dated approximately 3766 to 3637 BCE. A woman interred there wearing a spiral temple ring that will become a signature artifact in later Yamnaya graves. Her genome shows 40% CLV ancestry. Her burial posture is not Yamnaya. She is, in every genomic sense, closer to the original Proto-Indo-European speakers than any man buried near her. Her children, in a world about to be reshaped by mounted steppe warriors, spoke what you are speaking now. And the language she gave them? The people who built Stonehenge had their own. Completely different language, spoken for thousands of years across Western Europe. Not one word of it has survived. Not one. We do not know a single syllable of the language spoken at Stonehenge. It is gone as completely as the people who spoke it. Northern Ireland, present day. A woman sits in a clinic and receives a diagnosis of hereditary hemochromatosis, a metabolic condition where the body absorbs too much iron from food. Left untreated, it leads to liver damage, heart problems, joint pain. Her doctor notes she carries the C282Y allele, the specific genetic variant responsible for the condition. He tells her it is more common in people of Irish descent. He does not tell her, because he almost certainly does not know, that this allele first appears in the British and Irish archaeological record at a precise moment in time. The Bell Beaker migration, approximately 2400 BCE. This isn't just ancient history. This is in your DNA right now if you have Irish, Scottish, Welsh, or Western British ancestry. Dr. Daniel Bradley and his team at Trinity College Dublin published a landmark study in PNAS in 2015, the first study to ever detect a known Mendelian disease variant in prehistoric human remains. They sequenced 3 Bronze Age individuals from Rathlin Island, off the coast of Northern Ireland, dated between 2026 and 1534 BCE. All 3 males carried Y chromosome haplogroup R1b, the hallmark of the Bell Beaker population, and the study confirmed the C282Y allele present in those same Bronze Age individuals, a variant found in none of the sampled Neolithic people who preceded them. The hemochromatosis allele did not evolve in Ireland. It arrived in Ireland, with the people who replaced the builders of Stonehenge. In County Mayo, where the frequency of C282Y exceeds 10% of the population, hemochromatosis clinics see patients every week. These are not people reading about ancient DNA. These are people managing a chronic condition, a condition that arrived in their ancestral bloodline 4,000 years ago, carried by a population crossing the North Sea from a Dutch wetland holdout who had merged with steppe migrants from the Caucasus-Lower Volga region. Medicine is archaeology. These patients are living evidence. The C282Y allele is not the only thing those migrations deposited in living bodies. In 2024, Dr. Devansh Pandey and Dr. Vageesh Narasimhan at the University of Texas at Austin, working with Dr. Nandita Garud at UCLA, published a study in Nature Communications scanning 708 ancient European genomes across 7,000 years. They found 14 distinct candidate regions of natural selection, 14 places in the European genome where something specific was being favored by evolution, and roughly half of those selection signals are now partially or completely invisible in modern European genomes. They were obscured by the same migrations that introduced them. There are genetic stories in your body that standard DNA ancestry tests cannot read. Not because the technology is insufficient, because the migrations that produced you scrambled the signal of everything that came before them. At this point in the story, it is tempting to feel like the picture is complete. 3 migrations, 3 ancestral contributions layered into the modern European genome. Western hunter-gatherers from the Mesolithic, Anatolian Neolithic farmers arriving around 9,000 years ago, bringing lighter skin and agriculture and new disease pressures. Then the Bronze Age steppe expansion, the Bell Beaker culture, the Yamnaya descendants arriving with horses and metal and a Y chromosome lineage that would dominate the continent. 3 waves, done, solved. Except Pandey and Narasimhan's 2024 study didn't just find 14 selection signals. It found something about what happened to them that changes the picture entirely. Their method, a multi-locus approach that outperformed every previous selection detection technique used on ancient DNA, found that approximately half of all detectable selection signals in European prehistory exist only in the earliest time period they examined, before the major Bronze Age admixture events. After those migrations, those signals dropped below detection, not because the selection pressure disappeared, because the migrations overwrote the genomic context in which those adaptations had been accumulating. Some of those obscured candidates involve immune system genes, specifically genes that appear to have been under active selection during the period when Neolithic farmers first brought domesticated animals into close contact with human populations. The body was adapting to new pathogens introduced by cattle, sheep, pigs. That adaptation was real. It was happening. It was being encoded generation by generation into the genomes of people who lived and died in early European farming communities. And then the Bronze Age came, and half of it became invisible. The 3 migration model is not wrong. But it is not the complete picture. Every migration wave that produced you also cost you something. An adaptation that was working. A selection signal accumulating toward a threshold it never reached. A biological response to a disease pressure that got diluted before it could finish its work. You are not the sum of your ancestral migrations. You are also the remainder left after each one erased part of what the previous one built. There are 3 things this story has revealed so far. The first is that the face of ancient Europe was not what we were shown. The second is that the replacement of its people was structured around the elimination of men. The third is that the language you are speaking arrived through the women who survived it. And the mechanism of that arrival is the thing that changes everything. The Pontic-Caspian steppe, approximately 3000 CE. The Yamnaya expansion is at its peak. Across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of grassland, a society is operating under a reproductive structure that, when geneticists first quantified it, seemed almost impossible. The 2025 Nature study by Lazaridis, Reich, Pinhasi, and colleagues estimated that Yamnaya men were fathering children with between 4 and 10 women each. The Y chromosome pool is staggeringly narrow. A tiny elite of men with a specific haplogroup, R1b, fathering the overwhelming majority of the next generation. The mitochondrial DNA pool, the maternal line, is comparatively diverse. And here is the fact that took me the longest to fully absorb. R1b, the Y chromosome haplogroup carried today by the majority of men in Western Europe, the haplogroup we have been treating as the genetic signature of the Indo-European expansion, was not present in the original Proto-Indo-European speaking population. It was not part of the CLV people who first spoke the language that became English, French, German, Hindi. R1b arrived later. It arrived through men. The language was already there, carried by CLV women, before the men who are now credited with spreading it were even born. The men carried the horses, the weapons, the Y chromosome. The cattle that Pandey and Narasimhan's study shows introduced new disease pressures into European populations. They carried the expansion. The women carried the words. In a society structured around extreme male polygyny, where one man might have children with 10 women, and where those men's mobility and absence was guaranteed by the demands of mounted pastoralism, the primary language environment for every child was not their father's. Their father was often not there. The primary language environment was their mother's. And their mother, generation after generation, carried the CLV-derived linguistic heritage forward. Every conquest narrative of the Bronze Age, every Indo-European expansion story you have read, carries an unexamined assumption that the dominant culture spread with the dominant male lineage. The genomics say that is not what happened. The male lineage spread. The culture, the language, survived in the maternal line that the male lineage moved through. The language you are speaking was transmitted to you through women living in a society built by men who had been selected, generation after generation, for their willingness to kill. And there is no part of that sentence you can fact-check your way out of. Salisbury Plain, approximately 2380 BCE. 100 years after the last stone went up, a traveler arrives at Stonehenge. Based on isotope analysis and ancient DNA from Bronze Age British burials, this person carries 75% steppe ancestry. He came from somewhere else, or his parents did, or their parents did. He is not descended from the people who placed these stones. He does not know what they were for. The monument stands. It will stand for another 4,000 years. People will bury their dead near it. They will orient their burials toward it. They will treat it as sacred. They will construct their cosmology around it. None of them will be biologically related to the people who built it. Research analyzing Bronze Age individuals buried around Stonehenge confirmed this. The Bell Beaker population who arrived after the replacement used the monument, continued it, incorporated it into their world, but they shared no direct biological continuity with its builders. The meaning the monument originally held, whatever that meaning was, did not survive the people who held it. Before we get to the final thought, I want to put something directly to you. If you are of British, Irish, Scandinavian, or Northwestern European descent, the Bell Beaker genome is in your DNA. The people they replaced are not, or barely. You carry the arrival. You do not carry the erasure. Somewhere in the demographic record between 2480 BCE and 2380 BCE, your biological line and the line of the Stonehenge builders diverged. One of those paths leads here, to this moment, to you reading these words. The other path leads nowhere we can follow. We have no names for the people at the end of it. We have no word in any living language descended from theirs. We have a monument and a shadow. If this is the kind of history you want to keep receiving, the kind that doesn't let you off easy, subscribe. The next video goes somewhere even older, and the ground there disappears even faster. They built the stones. They raised the last one. They vanished before anyone arrived who could ask their name. And we have been standing at Stonehenge ever since, mistaking a monument for a memory.